Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast. It's October.
My favorite month.
Spooktober.
I love
That
it.
means we're going to start covering a lot of musicals and movies about
Documentaries.
dancers that become famous and then get involved in drugs and then get unfamous.
That's right. That's a very large field of people.
No, we're going to talk about Halloween movies.
I love
That's
October
a good
because
idea.
I like horror movies all year round. Every day I can watch a horror movie all the time. I watch literally everything I see. I watch everything I see, everything that's available. But this is the one month where you're not a freak for doing that. So I love that people all of a sudden are interested in horror movies. It's like you get to October and this little switch flips, and it's like everybody's like, "Oh, have you seen any good horror movies?" I'm like, dude. I have some horror movies for you.
And there's a lot of new ones that are released. So, even on streaming services, of course.
I love it. So much content.
Halloween is coming, Hellraiser, blah, blah. There's,
so
Barbarian. But, it's also fun to look back at the ones that we just think back to from, years gone by and say, that one's sticking with me. Why is that one working? Why do I keep thinking about that? And it makes sense to go back to the 1970s because that is just a classic film decade, number one.
Kind of a defining era for horror films, I think, because that's when they first started to become contenders, like Academy Awards and considered to be a serious film. Before that, they were sort of exploitation, which is what they always are, kind of. But you look at movies before some of the 70s ones, and you think, they're cheesy, kind of maybe cheesy. But then suddenly in the 70s, there was this thing that happened with a couple of particular films.
Well, Night of the Living Dead was the 60s, but that was low budget, but that was sort of like just a humongous hit, and that was sort of like the start of modern horror, kind of getting away from the first like really gratuitous gore for that time period, etc. But in the 70s, there was obviously a couple of huge hits, and so we just want to talk about a few.
You get directors who are really talented who decide to make horror films like they're serious films and not just trash. And so all of a sudden we get these artful, well-made horror films. And also people were like, wow, these movies make money and they're scary. Let's do more. So they did.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious one is The Exorcist. That was a huge film, and it, awards and everything else. And it had a serious vibe to it. And I think, when you see all those videos of, you look on YouTube and go, premiere Exorcist and look at all the interviews with people who were going to see The Exorcist in 1973 when it came out, and they were freaking out. People were saying, "Oh, I couldn't stand it. I had to leave and I passed out and
people were fainting.
I was disoriented. People were fainting." Yeah. And you know why? I think is because people had never seen a horror film treated that way before, presented to them that way. The cast was incredible. The acting was totally believable. It was done in a way that horror films had not been done before. Yeah. It showed you these characters, Chris McNeil and Reagan McNeil, and you totally believed them. They were realistic. She's an actress, and this is
suburban Washington. It wasn't Transylvania, or
it wasn't in a castle. It was normal people, like really realistic people. Who were involved in this, and it also touched on religion, which was a heavy thing back then. I mean, certainly had crosses with vampires and whatnot, and certain kinds of religion imagery type things. But this one was a flat out, Catholic horror fantasy. Like, what would happen if such things really were true? You want to know if that stuff, what it would be like if it were really true? Well, here you go.
This is what would happen. And a lot of it seemed almost like it was mental illness, which made it scarier because there's that stigma attached to mental illness. So they took that and then made it, what if it wasn't just mental illness? But you almost wondered, was it real? Like, I feel like you could almost go either way with that one, even though we did see some things. But
you can look at it two different ways. You can also look at it as a metaphor for a woman reacting to the fact that her little girl is growing up and becoming a person that she didn't anticipate.
Right.
It's like the fear, I guess. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. But if, Mark, you have a young girl, there's probably times when you were like, what?
She must be possessed.
Well, at this age, 13, 14, 15, it's when, it's no more the cute little girl that you can control. It's like she's got her own thing, her own life, and she's spreading her wings, ready to leave the nest.
Aww.
And you're calling Father Karras to come over and
and you're like, there's got to be a problem. This isn't right.
Right. But what Exorcist did is open up the floodgates to say, hey, this is a big money. We can, so big budget films, low budget films. We're making horror films. It's going to be the something,
And artistic, good directors started getting involved. It wasn't just these exploitation people that were trying to churn out, the brain eaters and the corpse grinders and things like that. They were like, you know what? We can take a story that's got a little bit of depth to it and a little bit of seriousness, but still firmly in the horror realms, like movies like The Omen, which was also had a religion edge, a pretty heavy religion edge. And I think it's interesting. The horror comes from the idea, what if it was real?
Right.
To me, that's always a fascinating idea. It's like, well, if you believe in things like that, like Satan and demons and devil worshippers and
that's real to them.
This is what it would look like. This is what happens.
Because in The Exorcist and The Omen, there's clergy are a big part of those films. They're actually going to a church or and talking to these people. What's going on? Well,
prophecy.
And
that's as scary as it gets for a lot of religious people. And also, I want to talk about too, like throw up posters here and there. The Exorcist had one of the most iconic posters. This is great because making it black and white and just a little scene from the film, it's so perfect and it's so artful. And they used actual lavender. Like there were so many choices that were made to make this poster that don't seem obvious. Like, oh, wouldn't you need red type to make it look scary? Why don't you show a possessed person? Why shouldn't you show a close up? And then Burk has the actual poster.
There it is, the real one.
The purple one. It's the
That's right.
That's a kind of a rare purple, the purple version.
Well,
But unfortunately, it's folded, so there's like fold lines in it.
Yeah, but that makes it look real.
Yeah.
That makes it real.
And so it's just a classic film and always will be. You can watch it 40 years later and it still works in a lot of ways, or 50 years later, however old it is. But then, so let's talk about some other films that sort of stick in our head as being, that affected us, whether it was a big budget film or, a smaller one. Kathy, you want to go first?
Well, obviously by my shirt, my favorite movie of all time, plus my favorite horror movie of the 70s, plus just one of the greatest movies ever made.
Plus a great poster. It was just the whole vibe. Everything around it was.
It's a great poster, and this was illustrated. The man who illustrated it lost it. Like he gave it to the movie company, and they don't know what happened to it. Like this was one of the long lost pieces of art that would be just the holy grail of movie poster collectability if you could find this sketch somewhere or this illustration.
What I just happen to have? Hold on.
Happen to have it.
But the sketch is actually like
Joking.
Little 8.5, like it's small. He did a small illustration, like 8 by 11
really
or
small.
something.
Yeah.
It's not big, but it is. You can't do this better. Like I have a version of the shirt. It has the actual shark, but it's a different version. But instantly what it is. Yeah. And I also have a doormat that's like says, beach is closed with a bite out of it. I am obsessed with Jaws. There always have been, always will be. It's one of my favorites.
Well, it's a good movie. It's a solidly made film by a great filmmaker. It's worth studying if you're into filmmaking. You should, if you're into filmmaking and you want to make a horror film, watch Jaws to learn how to do it.
And specifically the scene where poor Alex Kintner gets it. That whole beach scene, which is about 4 minutes long, is a master class of direction.
Love it.
It is so, because we all know what it feels like to be on the beach, music, people screaming and stuff, and people laughing or whatever, and then you're looking out and you see something like a propeller going around this kid. I mean, that scene is like, I'll never forget it. I was like,
so horrifying.
Oh my God, that kid is actually going to get it.
And there was so much dread built, like they weren't supposed to have the beach open. Roy Scheider was on edge. They kept showing him like closing in on his close up. He's looking, no one's relaxed. Everyone's just like, oh my God, we're all going to die. And it's like, get the water. Everyone thinks we're afraid to go in the water. Terrifying. And because you're trying to do it like, I know this doesn't feel right, but I'm going to do it anyway. And everyone's afraid of the ocean anyway. So the idea that deep underneath the water, what's lurking, perfect, like what's happening in the dark, it's like great.
It's a great setting for it because, like you said, everybody's secretly afraid of what's under the water. But
Yeah.
also going to the beach is one of the great joys of the summertime, and it's so fun, and everybody's
Also
laughing and swimming. But there's that edge to it. What is down there?
Nature
And
wins.
there's giant, hungry, living things under there in this place that you're splashing around, and we sort of, as human beings, don't really belong in there.
Right. It's not our domain.
We can drown and die in there, and people do.
That's right.
And that's another thing. You have the beach is always considered to be this happy place. We're going to the beach, yay! Yeah. And the kids love it, and they've got all their toys and stuff. That shot that you were talking about, Mark, the where you said it looks like a propeller or something. Yeah. I love that in films where you feel a little disoriented by what the hell did I just see?
What am I seeing?
You're not expecting it because of the setting, because it's a kid paddling around and everything is fun and it's so familiar if you've ever been to the beach. And then something completely unfamiliar comes into your field of vision, that rolling weirdness of the shark, whereas the fin goes over like that. It's just so brilliantly staged, and it shocks the hell out of you because it's a familiar location, familiar scene, familiar sounds. Everything about it is happy, and then there's that moment and that push in on Roy Scheider.
I love it.
What that to me says is that is the moment where he's going, what have I just seen?
A good actor.
And it occurs to him. You're watching it occur to him. I love that.
And they had the nerve to kill a child in a film, which never happens. So a lot of times people don't consider Jaws a horror movie. They consider it something else. Like it's almost its own genre. But I consider it a horror movie, so I included it in my.
Well, they call it the first big summer blockbuster, but I remember after seeing Jaws, going to the beach and being afraid.
Everybody was.
That's how a horror film works.
At the same
you go to
time,
the beach and go, oh wait a minute, I don't want to go in. No.
And at the same time, nobody should be afraid of sharks. They should just be, they need to share the water with them. They shouldn't really be afraid. They're a natural animal to have in the ocean. We shouldn't be killing them. We shouldn't be wiping them out so we could go to the beach. Right. It's like that's one of those things. Like they're protected. They deserve to be there. We're in their house. So that was one of the after effects. Peter Benchley was kind of mortified, which I'm kind of surprised because what did you think was going to happen? Is that he was like, why does everyone hate sharks now? Because you wrote Jaws.
Right.
So, and
it happens in
sharks.
the movie too. The people go nuts to go kill the sharks, and it's all these people.
I love how they made them look like assholes.
Throwing dynamite in the water. And it's,
exactly. So there's Jaws. What do you got, Mark?
Well, I'm going to go as keeping with the ocean theme, and this is a completely different film, much more lower budget. I'm going from the angle like, watching a low budget film on HBO, which was a big thing back then, and seeing a movie that felt weird and different. And this is not a classic, but it's one that sticks with me. It's called Shockwaves. And it's from 1977, Ken Wiederhorn, Florida filmmaker.
Yep.
And he made this low budget film that felt like this is not made by like a Hollywood guy. This was made very down and dirty. Not a lot, there's not a lot of effects. It's just these kind of Nazi ghouls that kind of come out of the water.
I love that movie.
Yeah, much like Jaws, it's like freaked me out when I would go to the beach because there's just shots of these guys sort of like kind of just getting up in the ocean and just looking, and it's a creepy scene. The movie isn't great, but there's a lot of fun stuff in it. Peter Cushing's in it.
Peter Cushing,
yeah, and it stuck with me when I saw it. It was one of those films I think back, like that was kind of a moment for me where I saw something that was weird, made by somebody that's not in the mainstream, and it was effective.
So another ocean film.
It's an ocean.
I think interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a movie it's something you're at the beach. You're not supposed to see these weird guys sort of stand up,
right?
At a time and like looking at you. That's scary to me.
But one thing about that movie that I love is
copy line.
Yeah.
Once they were almost human, beneath the living, beyond the dead, from the depths of Hell's Ocean. It's like Hell's Ocean or just the ocean? I don't like. Well, what's Hell's Ocean? Okay, go ahead.
One thing I love about that movie is the fact that it looks different. It was shot in Florida, so it's got this kind of there's a vibe to the Florida beaches. They have a certain kind of sand and a certain kind of water, and the plant life, and it doesn't look like Malibu.
No.
It doesn't look like LA oceans, and it's the terrain that they're in is kind of, it seems kind of scary on its own for some reason. There's the Spanish moss hanging down from the trees.
It's like swampy-ish and sort of very humidity. Like you feel the humidity in the movie.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Which I think
mosquitoes and
so it has that down and dirty vibe that really affect. Like I said, I saw something weird. So
and the visual of those like corpse, they're like reanimated Nazis that leftovers from some Nazi experiment and raising the dead to use as warriors,
and easy to hate because they're Nazis.
Yeah,
and just the styling of Nazis. They're wearing a dead guy in a Nazi uniform walking across the bottom of the ocean. There's a scene of them walking underwater, just walking with those goggles they're wearing that are stitched onto their faces. And
love it.
Yeah.
It's a cool movie, I think.
Yeah, it is. Good one.
Yeah. How about you, Burk? I know you mentioned Exorcist, but
Exorcist is a good one. That you can always go with. You can't go wrong with that one. The Exorcist and the Omen, which I talked about. But another one that I like, that is kind of rare. It's kind of hard to find, but for some reason, I always go back to this movie. I don't know why, but because it's not. I wouldn't call it a classic, but it has a feel to it. It has an atmosphere to it. The Haunting of Julia. With Mia Farrow. It was after she did Rosemary's Baby, and she's great in this one too. But it's a ghost story. It's kind of like Don't Look Now. It has that kind of vibe where a child dies, and it's horrible and heartbreaking and horrendous. And then you go through the suffering of the parents after that happens. And it sort of addresses the idea of how such a thing happening in your life might change you and might make you open to certain things. We've also, in a more modern movie, Hereditary, but this one, it's a ghost story. I guess I can give a little bit away, but it's a Peter Straub, who sadly we lost recently. But it's a ghost story with a twist, which is kind of interesting. The idea that somebody you love would die, and then you would see what you think is their ghost, but it's actually some other thing that's trying to trick you. And it's just, when you start realizing what's going on in the film, it's like, God, this is kind of creepy. Even though it's not like one of those in-your-face kind of ghost stories, it has these creepy moments. It's a little slow moving. The music is classic for that era. It's a very 70s style film. Mia Farrow's great. It's got Keir Delay in it, one of the astronauts from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I think it's just a really moody,
it's really
moody film, and it has one of the most shocking, heartbreaking, strangely poignant endings of a film. The beautiful camera that just goes around very slowly around a chair, and then the end credits roll over a still image, this final still image, and it's like, it just, you can't just go, okay, that was a fun movie. It's like, no, this isn't dark.
You don't walk away like, well, not next. You're like, ugh.
I want to see that because I haven't seen that. I've never seen that film, so that's on the list.
Whoops.
It's kind of depressing because if something like that happened, you might be open to some other evil force getting in and tricking you.
I thought the poster is interesting because they don't even show Mia Farrow in this poster,
right?
And they kind of make the poster a spoiler, sort of. But it's a very eerie illustration of a transparent girl. She had no one to play with for 30 years. So who are you going to play with?
It is kind of a spoiler, though.
But nobody knows that until they see it, right?
Well, the opening scene, you see the Mia Farrow's daughter dying. So if you're thinking about the poster, you're like,
what's happening there?
Yeah.
Well, that's the promise. Like, you're hoping you are going to see a ghost story.
It is a ghost story, and it is a
Peter Straub, who knows how to, like, a ghost story is one of the great novels of
Ghost
horror.
story. It's similar
all
to
time.
that in some ways, but like I said, it's a little low key. It's one of those moody things. It takes a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of character development, a lot of
classic 70s horror, like kind
yeah.
of low key. Yeah.
All right,
There's
Kath, how about you?
You know,
So
Give us another.
I'm
scary
going with
ghost.
like kind of big crowd pleasers.
That's all right.
That's good.
I'm going to talk about, you know, there's Night of the Living Dead and then there's Dawn of the Dead. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go Dawn of the Dead. That's 78. Still George Romero. He decided to go color on this one. And I think what I loved about it was the fact that it was shot in a mall. The idea of
Yeah.
all the zombies going to a mall. And they even mentioned something like, why are they all coming here? Because it's something they remember and they enjoyed.
It was something important to them.
I love that the mall is where people, you know, zombies would go. Like that's,
Yes.
they're, you know, compelled to go
They're
there.
drawn to it.
And the idea of living in a mall, there's that sort of little weird, you know, aspect of like, it'd be kind of cool, like as a kid, to stay overnight in the mall, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
so they
You
have
can
that
have whatever
kind of
you
idea.
want.
It's so fun. So they bring in a level of fun to it that I think is really effective, and that they really bring some really extreme gore. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like one of these,
Yeah.
like Tom Savini, and I think Tom Savini has a cameo in it. Like he's really like, having a lot of fun on this one. So when you're thinking of the origination of the zombie on film, you have to go Day of the Dead, and then Dawn of the Dead took it to the next level, which is color, bigger budget, extreme. You know, and the fact it was even a hit, even though that's one thing you don't realize, it was so gory, like so
Yeah.
gory, and yet the 70s, when I watch them now, they're really intense. Like I feel like there's a level where we kind of stopped doing that kind of gore for a while. Like it just seemed like too much, because when you go back to the 70s, that stuff does not hold back.
Right.
Really,
Oh, that
and
was
because it's
rated
older,
X.
it feels real. You know,
Yeah, I think it was rated X when I remember it was like, oh, well, that's X, because you know the
Intense.
helicopter scene and all the the guts
right.
coming out and all that crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
pulling
that great
guy
scene with
apart
the
and-
elevator, like where he's in the
Yeah.
elevator and they go in, now he's trapped. It was so great. It was so great.
Yeah.
And then the poster is interesting too. It's pink. Like
Yeah.
I love 70s posters because they don't necessarily sell them as the big budget kind of glossy stuff we do now. And every time they want us to do like a 70s style poster, I always think of some of these where it's graphic. The colors aren't what you really would think they would use. You know, it's like it's a very hand done looking illustration. Like you really want to go there with that, and it's just really fun. When there's no more room in hell, the dead walk the earth and the mall.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
It's almost designed to look really good on a t-shirt.
Totally.
Yeah.
So very fun to see it. So I've always liked that movie because it had that sense of humor just in the whole setup, and yet it brought super scary shit.
It has
Yeah.
that cool music by Goblin. I love
Yeah.
the soundtrack.
Yeah.
I
So
remember
good.
I mentioned earlier my friend Mark Maddox, who I went to high school with, and we were both like really horror fans and into Star Trek. We were total nerds, but we were cool nerds. But we went and saw this movie and just went back and saw it again and again.
Mm-hmm.
It was so gory, but it was gory in a way that was almost funny.
Kind of accessible gore.
Right.
It was very extreme.
Well,
It's
also
weird.
like it was weird because the helicopter scene, the guy is obviously has it looks like him and
He's
Munster.
ready for it because
Yeah.
he's got a built-up head.
It's
Yeah.
that big head. And it was so good. The remake is also amazing. Like
Yeah.
I love the Zack Snyder remake. It's
Oh.
almost elevates the movie in general. Like it wasn't just like, let's just do a remake, a cash grab, whatever. They made that movie amazing. Like it's still one of my favorite horror movies. So
But
well done.
When my friend Mark and I saw this movie in the theater, we immediately started our own epic production on Super 8, and we made this zombie movie. We got everybody we knew from school to be a zombie in it, and
So funny.
we did some pretty heavy duty special
Dude,
effects.
you gotta
and
let us
stuff.
see that stuff. We gotta show it.
Maybe sometime we'll have Mark on and we'll show
Go through
it.
some of those old films. So good.
I play a zombie that just starts eating a dead zombie. Like one of the zombies gets killed. He shoots
So funny.
the zombie to use as bait so that the other zombies will attack the dead zombie and eat it.
I love it.
That's so
We
bad.
filmed it in our friends' yards, and we're running around in the streets with blood all over us and machetes and stuff.
So good. We gotta see those. All right, Mark,
Yeah.
your last one.
Yeah, my last one. Okay, I'm going to go with another kind of movie that affected me, and this one's called The Sentinel. Burke mentioned it. This is a movie
Oh
directed
yeah.
by Michael Winner, who did a lot of all the Death Wish
Mm.
films with
Yeah.
Charles Bronson. He has a real feel for New York 70s. And why I like this movie, it takes place in New York City. It has that grit that 70s New York movies have.
Yeah.
And also it's a definite, a kind of a copy or it's sort of like of The Exorcist, but it's like New York. It's a model who moves into this apartment building that is kind of the gateway to hell.
It's still there and still looks exactly the same, I might add.
I love that.
But what I love about, there's some scenes and there's one that Burke and I talk about all the time. There's where all of a sudden there's somebody in this room that just sort of walks out behind a door.
Scariest thing ever.
Fucking
Like,
scary. I mean, it's like, it's so simple. It's like
the best thing in the movie and the scariest thing in the movie, but it's such a throwaway, quickie, weird scene. Like, what?
Yeah, well, that's why, because it's so out of left field, and
That's
it just sort of like happens, and it just sticks with me, and that movie sticks with me in a weird way, and I think it's because when I saw it, the New York vibe, the feeling, something, it just sort of works as a film for me. So it sticks
the fashion
with me.
Looks so good now. I
love
it
everything
so
about it.
It's
I like
a strange movie too.
It is. It's
and
really
the
strange.
music by Gil Mallet, I think, is really
Gil
good
Mallet.
too.
Yeah.
So
Another great poster.
Yeah.
Way too much type on it.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much type. It's like, in case people didn't know what this is about, this is kind of a weird title. There must be forever be a guardian at the gates of hell. She was young. She was beautiful. She was next. It's like, those don't even relate to each other.
Yeah.
But
and then something at the top.
It's one of those interesting stories that kind of reminds me of a John Carpenter film in a way. Like,
yeah, I can see that.
It could have been a John Carpenter film in some ways. It's similar to maybe Prince of Darkness in that they've discovered this ancient order of religious order that's been protecting something. And I always love those stories where there's this, conspiracy that's gone out through history, and the old guy who's guarding the gateway to hell, just that vibe is so cool. I don't know.
That's great. That's a great one. That makes me want to watch it again,
yeah.
because it's that slow burn, creepy movie. That's a great one.
Yeah.
So next week we're gonna do our favorite Halloween movies from the 80s.
I don't get to do my last one.
Didn't you do two?
Can I do one more?
Do one more.
Because I think I only did one, right?
You did two, but go ahead.
Oh, what two?
I don't remember.
Oh, we can do one more. Go for it, Burke.
I thought I only did The Haunting of Julia.
No,
you did Haunting of Julia, and you did The Exorcist and Omen.
Oh, okay. Those.
But you could do another one if you have one ready to go. Go ahead.
I do. I want to just bring up one that gets mentioned.
I mean, there's so many great ones. Like this is hard to pick. There's so many. But go ahead.
I really like The Wicker Man, the 1973 The Wicker Man.
The Nick Cage one?
No.
Not that one, people. Do not watch that one.
The real one.
Real one.
It's like the definitive folk horror thing, and we've talked a lot about Midsummer, Ari Aster's Midsummer, and the whole idea of folk horror, which is again, it's kind of got roots a little bit in religious horror, but the religious idea, the sort of spiritual idea, is more of a pagan thing in folk horror. The basis of it is these kind of old, forgotten, folk religion type things, and this one is the definitive one. It's a classic. A police officer hears about a missing girl on this remote island, and Summer Isle, and flies there. It's great because it's also kind of isolation horror. It puts this character, and he's this very righteous man, and the opening scenes show him singing in the church, and then he goes to this town where everybody seems to be into this really sort of like sex-based pagan religion, this kind of obsessed with fertility and things like that, and he is appalled, of course. But the coolness of the movie is how innocent it seems. Like they're just a bunch of nice hippies on this island, right?
Well, they're innocent. They couldn't hurt anybody.
But Christopher Lee's there. That's a trouble.
Then Christopher Lee shows up, and you're like,
Christopher
okay,
Lee
wait a
is bad
minute.
news. And then we have another cool 70s. I just love these 70s posters. That's why I keep showing them. Flesh to touch, flesh to burn. Don't keep the Wicker Man waiting.
Yeah.
A totally corrupt shocker from the author of Sleuth and Frenzy.
Yeah, Robin Hardy, who didn't direct a lot of films, but he really does a great job.
It's an iconic film. Still holds up.
And it's got good music. Another thing that I always liked about it, the soundtrack to it has got all these sort of folk songs. And a lot of the folk songs in it have kind of a dark edge to them. And the idea of the film is one of those things that's it's like this creep. It creeps up on you gradually. It's a mystery, like what happened to this missing girl and what happens on this island. And why was this particular man, this particular police officer, why has he gone there? It's really fun. I don't want to give it away if you've never seen it, and a lot of people have never seen it.
I mean, it's old, but we want people to watch these.
And you have the beautiful Britt Eklund in there, which
yes, and she has a freak out, like a sexy freak out scene in there too. That is
well, that's a classic. And it makes me want to go back to all these films.
Yes.
So it's instead of searching out the new stuff, going back to get the creepy vibe of those, and they're wonderful films. And there's a huge list. Burk gave us a list of the films he has. It's like 50, 60,
there's so many great ones. Oh my god! And I picked two of them.
The surface,
the big ones. But be sure and put in the comments what is your favorite 70s horror film, and if you don't have one, go watch them. At least watch the ones they're suggesting. But really, if you look up 70s horror, you almost can't go wrong. There's so many great ones. So definitely check into that.
It's a great era for it, because I think it was good. Like we were saying at the beginning, is the era when serious filmmakers and serious writers
started getting into it.
And realizing that there's a depth, a vast wealth of stuff to mine,
and they're not just cash grabby cheapo knockoffs like a lot of contemporary horror end up being. Just people want to make quick buck, so they weren't good
movies,
but
like
these are like
kind of thing.
We're saying something, we're creating a good drama with great actors, but we're also creating something really scary. So definitely check out the 70s horror films,
because in books, literary horror had existed before. There's some old literary horror books that have that depth and that power and that profundity and whatever else, things like Wicker Man have.
That's right. So let us know what you think. 70s horror.
We can talk about it all day, and throw it in the comments and we'll take and we'll respond. So as always, thanks for watching. And,
Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Bye, everybody.